21st, 23rd, there we go, meeting of the Seattle Planning Commission. First off, we'd like to respectfully acknowledge that our meeting today is taking place on occupied Coast Salish land, and we pay respect to the Coast Salish elders, past and present, and extend that respect to their descendants and to all Indigenous people. To acknowledge this land is to recognize the history of physical and cultural genocide and settler colonialism, which continues to displace Indigenous peoples today. It is also to recognize these lands, waters, and their significance for the resilience and wise peoples who continue to thrive in this region despite the consequences of displacement and broken treaties. Those who hold settler privilege in the city must work towards supporting the Coast Salish people and all Indigenous people, using the various forms of wealth and privilege that we reap to it, or due to it. My name is Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Planning Commission, along with Zio Alvarez. All right. Let's see, we are happy to make all commission meetings open to the public. Please note that the Planning Commission does not hold public hearings since the Commission is an advisory body. We provide recommendations to elected leaders who in turn make the actual decisions. We encourage individuals and organizations to provide their comments appropriately to elected officials. This meeting is a hybrid meeting with some individuals participating remotely and others in person at the Boards and Commissions room at Seattle City Hall. I'd like to now invite, we're going to do the color space, our color brave space norms. I'd like to invite a commissioner to choose one of them and speak briefly as to how they think that those norms have particular relevance for today's agenda. Just pipe up. Okay, somebody.
I could go.
Okay.
I think the practice examining racially biased systems is an appropriate one, with the work that is being done by the folks that are here to kind of share with us today with the Equity Development Initiative, particularly. So I'm really curious to kind of to get an update, and yeah, I think it's important work that the department's doing. So I look forward to hearing more about it.
Great. Thank you, Dylan. Let's see. We have an opportunity to make any amendments or modifications. Does anyone have any amendments or modifications to color brave space norms? If not, then I suggest we agree to all these norms. All right, we're going to do a round of introductions for the commission, and then we'll go to staff. Let's see. So, as I said, I'm Matt Hutchins. I use he, him pronouns. I am an architect specializing in housing. I live in West Seattle, and I'm going to pass it to my co-chair, Zio.
Morning, everybody. Sorry if the sound quality is terrible. I'm on the bus. Zio Alvarez, she, they pronouns. I live in White Center, Highland Park. My day job, I work at an architecture firm in downtown Seattle. I'll pass to Deanna.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Diana Quintanar. My camera, okay. Diana Quintanar, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and for my day job, I'm a multimodal transportation planner. I'll pass it over to Rebecca.
Hi, everyone. Rebecca Brune, she, her pronouns. I live in Crown Hill, and my day job is working on transit-oriented development for Sound Transit. And I will pass it to Michaela.
Good morning, Michaela Daffern, she, her pronouns. I live in Capitol Hill, and I work in affordable housing policy and planning. And I can't see the screen, so I pass it to anyone who wants to go next.
How about Rose?
Morning, I'm Rose Lucella-Whitson, pronouns they, them. I live up north in Licton Springs, Northgate area, and I work as a wetland biologist and proning specialist with Jacobs for my day job. I'll pass to Nick.
Hey, good morning. Nick Whipple. I use he, him pronouns. I live in West Seattle in the North Delridge neighborhood. And for my day job, I'm a city planner on the east side. How about Cecilia?
Good morning. I'm Cecilia. I use she, her pronouns. I'm sorry I'm a little late. I'm having troubles with Teams. I live in Capitol Hill and work in disability advocacy. And I just joined, so I'm not sure who's gone already.
How about Margaret?
Morning. My name is Margaret Zellis. I live in Fremont, and I use she, her pronouns. And my day job is that I'm a law student working towards a career in land use law. And then I also might need help figuring out who needs
Yeah,
to.
let's wrap up with Dylan G.
Hi, Dylan Gosecki. I use he, him pronouns. I live in Central District. I'm an architect working in multifamily, residential, and urban infrastructure work. That's it. On to Vanessa and staff.
Great, thanks. Robin.
Robin McGonigal. I live on Vashon Island. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm staff of the commission. Olivia.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Olivia Baker. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission. John?
Good morning. I'm John Hoy. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm staff to the Planning Commission.
I'll wrap this up. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Vanessa Murdoch. I use she, her pronouns, and I too am staff to the Planning Commission. And I will turn it back to Matt.
Great, thank you. All right, we have two items on the agenda for today. Staff from the Office of Planning and Community Development are joining us to update us on that office's work, responding to two statements of legislative intent addressing small business development and food deserts. And then we will be updated on the work of the Equitable Development Initiative. Before we get into that, let's see, we're going to approve some minutes. So do I have a motion to approve the September 23rd minutes?
Nick moves.
Second?
Rebecca seconds.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any changes or amendments to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, then I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Any abstentions? Okay, and it's passed. All right, some upcoming commission meetings. We have our next Housing and Neighborhoods Committee meeting will be held on November 6th from 7:30 to 9 online via the Teams format. And then our next full commission meeting is scheduled for Thursday, November 13th from 3 to 5:30 p.m. There are no other planning commission meetings this next week. Let's see, Vanessa, you have some announcements?
Yep, thanks, Matt. So as noted before, this is a hybrid meeting. Michaela is joining staff here in the Boards and Commissions room at City Hall, and the rest of the commissioners are joining via the Teams platform. A reminder for commissioners to please use the chat function in MS Teams only to be recognized to speak and to not use it for substantive comment, as members of the public who may be calling in to this meeting will not have access to the chat, and members of the public who are joining us via the Teams, via the web, do have access to the chat. So we want to make sure we're not having parallel conversations. Want to give just a brief update on the city's budget, which is currently under consideration by Seattle City Council. That has been going on for the month of October. There was a public hearing on October 7th. There will be another public hearing in November. Central staff gave presentations on policy considerations October 15th. through this past Monday, the 20th. And then next week, there will be a discussion of council member budget proposals. There are budget meetings on the 28th, 29th, and 30th of October. That's Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week. The Planning Commission will be providing public comment at the Tuesday, October 28th budget meeting that begins at 9:30. It's unclear at this point whether the public comment will be for 1 minute or 2 minutes. That will depend on the number of people providing public comment. And staff will be drafting up comment for delivery by either Zio Alvarez or Matt Hutchins, our co-chairs. And the gist of the commission's public comment will be really encouraging the city council to adequately resource and stay committed to the implementation of the vision and goals of the comprehensive plan, and specifically to make sure that the Office of Planning and Community Development is adequately resourced to carry out a number of work items that were identified by the council earlier this fall in their companion resolution as they worked through a number of amendments they had proposed for consideration of their own body in the final adoption of the comprehensive plan. So please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, and we'll continue to update you all on the status of the budget. The budget is we anticipate the budget being passed. Typically, it's done before Thanksgiving, sometimes the day before Thanksgiving. So we'll please keep an eye on the weekly reports that John sends out, and we'll keep you up to date on what is going on in the budget. I'm going to speak a little bit to our public comment, which we welcome. We have 3 different ways for members of the public to provide public comment. In person, joining us here in the Boards and Commissions room in City Hall, submitted to me in writing via email in advance of the meeting, or offered on our hybrid meeting platform, MS Teams. If offering comment during the meeting via Teams, please raise your hand in the Teams meeting to be recognized to speak. I do not see any members of the public dialing in, but if we did have members of the public dialing in, I would ask them to send me an email so I knew their number to be able to call on. I'll just take a pause here for a moment. We do have 2 members of the public joining us via Teams, actually 3. So I'm going to take a moment and see if the 3 members of the public joining us on Teams care to provide public comment. And if you do, please raise your hand in the Teams platform. I am not seeing any hands go up, and I did not receive any emails in advance, so we have no public comment for this meeting. And with that, I will pass the baton back to Matt.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, our first item of business is an update for the Small Business Development and Food Desert Statement of Legislative Intent. We'd like to welcome Jessica Ramirez from the Office of Planning and Community Development. Jessica is here to update us on her work responding to the City Council statements of legislative intent regarding the small business development and food deserts. We have 35 minutes for this agenda item. All right, Jessica, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thank you so much. My name is Jessica Ramirez. I also go by Jess. I started at the Office of Planning and Community Development at the end of April, so I'm rather new. And my first 2 bodies of work were responding to these slides. So it was a big lift for me as my first job in government, understanding these kinds of processes, but we got it done. And I actually have slides to share, so I don't know if what's currently being shared right now can get taken off the screen.
Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Oh, and I'm the at OPCD, I'm the Inclusive Growth Special Projects Manager and work directly under the Equitable Development Initiative program. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the food desert slide. For folks who are not familiar, what we were really trying to do here was create a report on policy and zoning options, looking at different siting and site requirements for different types of grocery stores across the city. Also wanting to assess how the city's zoning supports or restricts grocery store development, but also identify like potential zoning or policy changes that would better attract grocery stores. And I do have a slide that has a map on it that's going to be fairly difficult to read. So I'm going to try to send it in the chat after we're done. But right now I'm having a hard time seeing whether I can do that or not. And did y'all get to see these documents by chance?
No, we haven't seen the slides.
That's okay, no worries. All right, cool. So here, I'll go ahead and send it afterwards so people could take a better look. But yeah, here we mapped grocery access using the USDA SNAP retailer data set and the city's racial and social equity index. And what we found was a clear pattern around grocery stores that are clustered around kind of the major arterial roads, places like Rainier Avenue and Aurora and 15th Avenue Northwest, but much more limited in South Seattle. Neighborhoods like South Park and Georgetown and Rainier Valley stood out as having very few full service options, even though they scored the highest on equity priorities. So what we're trying to show here is how geography, but also race and income all intersect when it comes to something as basic as grocery store access. And I do want to add the team who worked on this with me. I'm not a land use and zoning expert, just want to put that out there. But it was Jeffrey Wentland, Philip Carnell, myself, Rico Kirindongo, and Diana Carzoni. So at the same time, we were looking at how grocery store markets also are changing quickly nationally. Two companies, Kroger and Albertsons, control about half the market in Washington State. And in Seattle, several large format stores have closed in the past year, including QFC and Safeway locations. And as you all probably know from the news, the recent closure of the Fred Meyer in Lake City. And then, of course, we have independent and culturally specific grocery stores, but they face some serious challenges around thin profit margins, high commercial rents, and limited access to financing. So even when the community demand is there for grocery stores, these barriers can make it hard for smaller stores to open or to stay open. And some local examples of that are community-led efforts to expand food access, particularly the Delridge Grocery Co-op opened in 2020, had a very strong volunteer base and support system, but had to close in 2024 due to financial and staffing challenges. And then we also had Cascadia Fresh Market, which operated for 8 months as a pilot, but really couldn't achieve profitability. However, in contrast, we have the Delridge Farmers Market, which is supported by Cultivate South Park's new cooperative grocery store model. And, it will show the potential for success when there's strong leadership, but also city partnership. And, these examples highlight how important community ownership and cultural relevance are in shaping food systems. And I also want to highlight EDI projects, so Equitable Development Initiative projects that are focused on food access. There are several. And the reason why I want to bring this to light is because there are places where the city is intervening and creating, supportive models for community-led projects to exist around food access. And then obviously zoning plays a huge role in this, where stores can actually locate themselves. Most grocery stores fall between the 20,000 and 50,000 square foot range, but many of our neighborhood commercial zones, NC1 and NC2s, cap the size of individual businesses, so below that threshold. And zones most supportive of grocery development are NC3, C1, C2, and Seattle mixed zones. So even then, the availability of large, affordable parcels, 50,000 or more square feet, remain one of the biggest barriers. But you can see just how limited these sites are, particularly in the very neighborhoods where grocery access is already fairly constrained. And so our outlines are a set of policy directions that can help shift this landscape, increase residential density in neighborhood centers to expand customer bases, add or expand commercial zoning in underserved areas, adjust size limits for grocery uses in NC1 and NC2 zones, use incentive zoning to include grocery stores in transit-oriented development or large mixed-use projects, and eliminate restrictive covenants that prevent former grocery sites from being reused. So, could be that together, all of these recommendations, all of these tools can make it easier and more financially viable for grocery stores to operate in neighborhoods that need them most. And at the end of the day, this work is fundamentally about equity. So it's just not about having a grocery store nearby. It's also about ensuring people have access to food that's culturally relevant, affordable, and that's part of a neighborhood economy. That's pretty much kind of the only ways that would work as well. And the city can play a proactive role in this. So by working with community-rooted organizations, CDFIs, and mission-driven grocery stores, and rather than trying to subsidize big chains, we can focus on supporting small format and cooperative models that help with keeping wealth in a decision-making model. So moving forward, this work was also across departments with Office of Economic Development and also Office of Sustainability and Environment. And so that work is now being led, but this work is now being led by OED, but in close coordination with OPCD and OSC. And the work of this project is continuing. The slide was submitted to council about a month ago, maybe almost 2 months ago now. And we're in the initial phase of research, which is to interview local and independent grocers, Town and Country, Wajimaya, PCC, Lamb Seafood, because we'd like to understand what would be needed to develop a small format grocery store pilot in neighborhoods where the limits of the square footage exist. And this concept is really also thinking about other grocery store models that can help bring together the public and private and philanthropic partners to help test new grocery store models in underserved neighborhoods. And so, we're hoping that it could help us understand what kind of technical assistance and zoning flexibility and financial tools would make the biggest difference for grocery stores, not only to, pop up in neighborhoods, but actually to be able to thrive in those neighborhoods as well. And this work is being coordinated again through OED and OSC. Recently, there's an executive order this last week from the mayor's office to continue doing that work. And I guess other things to know is that, we are looking at whether or not restrictive covenants is like also a way to eliminate the issue of having grocery stores, have the opportunity to come into neighborhoods. And we're also understanding that, like, if a Fred Meyer disappears, it would be a very rare and maybe not opportunistic place for another grocery store that could actually meet that like square footage that actually exists already. And that's about it. That's all I have on food deserts. And I see some questions in the chat. No, commissioners did not see any of this. Diana, the work around zoning.
Oh, no, Jess, I was, sorry, Jess, I was just asking, writing down the limits that you were sharing with us.
I see.
Yeah, the square footage size. I missed writing down the limits.
Okay. I'm getting a feedback. Somebody. Okay. Is anyone else hearing that?
Yeah,
Why did that happen all of a
echo.
sudden?
just finishes talking and then.
Okay.
There we go. Great.
There we go. Okay. So the other thing that I wanted to share is after this, I will send to you all the submitted slide, so you can look at the maps and whatnot. But yeah,
Okay.
any questions?
Yeah, let's see. We'll go through the chat. I think let's see. Deanna has the first question.
Thank you, Jess. This is so exciting. Great work, great presentation. Thank you for being here with us. I was just curious, and I know we've asked about this for many other issues, and I know that that's a challenge, but I'm curious, um, land banking in, some of these communities, might be an interesting approach to make sure either land banking or some, the type of incentives that would be necessary for parcels that could accommodate this type, supermarkets, et cetera, in a particular community. Is that being explored or looked at? And what mechanisms have you found just in your research might be interesting to consider in ways that perhaps the Seattle Planning Commission could also support those efforts if you've heard of anything that is promising?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think the mute needs to happen again. Okay. So the slide didn't address that issue, and I want to say that, I think a huge part of why this work kind of landed on my plate was because of the Equitable Development Initiatives program and the ways that it does fund community-led development projects. And this is also a resource issue, land banking, and is a difficult thing to do in this city, but it's not impossible. And we just need more opportunities for groups to be able to purchase land. And I know also, a piece of it that we all consider is the risk at which we take as a city entity to fund projects. So there's some sense of a need of viability in some of this work. But I think that, for example, the South Park project is going to be a really good testing ground to see what community led projects with culturally relevant food access looks like. I'm really excited about that one. And I imagine Casey and myself could come back and talk about that more in the future.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much.
Zio.
Hi, yeah, thank you so much for this presentation. Shout out to the Delridge Farmers Market. It's my farmers market, and I love the work that that org is doing in our neighborhood. In a somewhat similarly, like, I don't know, geographic lens. I think it's really interesting, and I know it's easier to work with the local independent supermarkets like the PCCs and such. But I live in Highland Park and we neighbor with White Center, which of course is unincorporated King County and not the city of Seattle. But one of the things that I love about the neighborhood is that there are so many small, culturally specific and relevant grocery stores, and most of them are not like large multi-store locations. And I just think it would be really interesting for the city to work with some of the smaller grocery store ownership or owners and models to see what opportunities there are for making the city of Seattle a more appealing location for them, and see maybe why they don't operate in the city and instead operate sort of on the outskirts. But appreciate the work and really, really like the presentation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really rich dialogue. I will say that we have been, myself and Philip and Rico have been having discussions with a group called Cushing Terrell, and we've been learning, they have a lot of relationships with Wajimaya, PCC, and TNC, for example. And we've learned a lot about the limitations for even those grocery stores to exist, even though they're a bit bigger, they're still they find that, like, you know, I think something that they're considering is like how their trucks go in and out of like some of these like higher density neighborhoods, but also they're having to deal with theft issues. And because of that, they're considering like what kinds of construction they can actually be in. So I don't know if you've noticed, but like a lot of the PCCs used to have like two entrances. And now one of them is always closed, and that's because of like theft. But then they also, for example, the one here in Columbia City, which is where I live, just down the street, it's like one of the most successful PCCs in all of Seattle, and yet they still struggle with the deliveries and the ways that their grocery store functions, and it like clogs up the street several times during the week. There was even on Saturday night I went through the Columbia City night market, and there was like a huge semi like literally moving through the street as like where food carts were. So it is like a pretty odd thing to see happening, and I think that's why this work is really important. Thinking about the placement of future grocery stores and the opportunities that small format might be the way. And the reason why we're thinking about that or considering it's not a hard and fast rule is because of what PCC is testing as a model in downtown Seattle, which is really about like to-go foods. It's less of like a grocery store, but just showing that having a grocery store in that size is fairly possible. Oh my gosh, I forgot I have another slide. Okay. Were there other questions?
Well, do you want to do this? Okay, there we go. All right. Let's see. Michaela has another question.
I kind of think my question is a little bit irrelevant the more I've thought about it. We've been looking a lot at neighborhood centers, which are these, kind of this new place type that may have some specific parcels that may be large enough for a small format grocery store. But I think you just explained to me a little bit of the real struggles that exist with operating in those areas. And I was thinking about it a little bit more, and because so much of South Seattle's zoned more densely than a neighborhood center, there's fewer neighborhood centers in South Seattle. And if the policy goal here is to increase access in food deserts, that's probably not the policy focus for increasing food access. Anyway, I guess I've spent too much time explaining why I don't have a question anymore, but thank you.
Well, I mean, what I will say is that with the mayor's executive order that was just released on Monday, we are looking also at through the continuing work of stakeholder engagement of these grocery stores. We're also looking at other kind of grocery mapping efforts, looking at the community indicators report, for example, to help kind of flesh out more some of these like data maps. And yeah, I think we're having to now look at, where is there a potential or like the possible closure, and can we like kind of forecast what could be a food desert, for example, in Rainier Valley? Like if a grocery store were to close, like that would put an entire neighborhood in a lot of trouble in terms of food access. So we're looking at those things too. Okay. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to go to the small business development and commercial displacement slide. Okay, great. So what we were looking at here is to expand the eligibility of EDI funding or the potential of that, particularly as it relates to small business development, but also what's the opportunity to support the creation of spaces that can meet the needs of future business, small business tenants and the EDI projects. And I will say the majority of this work was done alongside Julia Pasciuto, who's on the call. So Julia, at any point, if there's anything you want to say, or at the end, I welcome you to do so. So why EDI invests in commercial space? Racialized displacement. We prioritize community-driven control. We support projects that give public purpose. We also are looking at commercial and cultural spaces that are really key to identifying or to identity and mobility and cohesion within a community, a BIPOC community particularly. And also we're looking at stabilizing community organizations and small businesses through real estate ownership, but also looking at the delivery of public benefit services and the opportunities for those to be, to serve a community well. And we do this work in high displacement areas. So really looking at how we can protect culturally rooted communities across Seattle. So EDI investments of small business outcomes. This is a short list of some of this work. We have shared investments with OED, and then we also have direct investment in small businesses and small business related public benefits. So right now, OPCD and OED are working closely already to align our support for small businesses through the EDI. And the city already has several programs that are focused on BIPOC and immigrant and refugee-owned businesses, and all of that is structured to comply with state laws that prohibit direct investment in for-profit entities. But through the Capital Access Program, OED provides affordable loans to businesses that haven't quite had the access to financing. And then we also have the Tenant Improvement Program, which helps small businesses with storefront upgrades. And there's the Business Community Ownership Fund, also through OED, which helps stabilize rent and promote shared ownership of commercial real estate, so folks can stay in their neighborhoods. And going forward, OPCD and OED are coordinating earlier and more intentionally on EDI projects, but especially those with commercial or community spaces. And this is really, to make sure that the design and the funding and that the tenant strategies kind of all work together from the start. Kind of the future I'll give an overview of the future strategy, and Julie is going to go into this. So EDI strategic planning is really going to help guide the program's next phase. So, continuing to center community leadership and really looking at strengthen the city systems, and aligning resources to advance equity and prevent displacement. The strategic plan is going to set long-term values-driven roadmap that connects the city actions to measurable community benefits and lasting impact. In 2026, another RFP will be released, and OPCD plans to better coordinate funding and prioritize community needs and support small BIPOC businesses through clearer processes and criteria before the next EDI funding round happens. And just some key takeaways. So OPCD and OED are working together to strengthen small businesses and prevent displacement in these marginalized neighborhoods. And the city's approach through community-led design and programs like the Capital Access Program, the Tenant Improvement Program, and Business Community Ownership Fund has already expanded access to commercial space and ownership. So just by continuing to coordinate early and aligning the funding, we can make sure that EDI investments are advancing racial equity and economic stability. So again, it's not about just like a storefront, but really looking at lasting shared community benefit. That's what I got there. Julie, I'd welcome you to add anything if you'd like.
I don't have anything else to add at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions about the program. And you'll hear more about it later.
Yeah. Let's see. We have a couple more minutes. So I don't know if Dylan and Rose, your comments, if you want to, I don't know if there's anyone who wants to weigh in specifically on the small business development, since you were in the queue under the food deserts portion. I just want to make sure that we get equal spread of questions for both topics.
I could be quick and pivot my question to
okay, perfect.
What we discovered. The comment kind of applies to both a little bit, and it's picking up a little bit on what Michaela was talking about. The new place types that have been introduced in this comprehensive plan update that we're still in the middle of, neighborhood centers, corridors. There will be a new sort of opportunity for patrons in this area as we get more densities in these areas over the next 20 years. Neighborhood centers in particular, I do have some concerns with some neighborhood centers that are smaller, have less lots for development, that there may be focus on redeveloping lots that contain existing small businesses. And so that gets into small business displacement and the work that you guys are doing. And I want to say I'm really inspired by the work that you guys are doing. And I really would love to see this work really inform how the city rolls out these new neighborhood centers, this new place type. And I'm just, I guess I'm curious if you guys have been following any of these new neighborhood center place types and able to provide any input to OPCD to try to avoid displacement in these areas where we're going to allow new projects, new multifamily housing to go in. Did you guys have any strategies or any conversations yet about how to get ahead of potential displacement of existing small businesses. I guess just wondering if this research is able to kind of be applied and expanded beyond some of the case studies and the pilot projects that you guys have been doing so far.
Julia, are you up for opening the or answering the programmatic question?
Sure. And if I can reiterate just what I think I heard you say, which was, is there, what is the opportunity for the program to get ahead of some of the zoning changes?
Yeah, basically.
Well, the first thing I'll say is that EDI funds applications that come in from community-based organizations. And we do some, say, like early cultivation and conversations with the sponsor organizations when they have an idea, but they're not exactly sure. But we're not super proactive in planting like project seeds, so to speak. But I think what I'm hearing you say is maybe aligned with the first question we received about land banking, which is like, what's the city's role in identifying key properties that are at high risk of displacement? And I definitely, and potentially as a result of the zoning and land use changes that are being pursued through the comprehensive plan and comp plan implementation. So I don't think that we've kind of strategically, we have not had the bandwidth to be part of those conversations early enough. And we're not set up as a program to do that early land banking or property identification. But I do think that I would agree that I think the city has a role and unique information to be able to work on that. So it's a good flag for us.
Yeah. So you're kind of looking for organizations to come to you basically, and then you guys can work with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and something that I will say as well is that in my role at OPCD, even though I'm under the EDI program, I span most of all the divisions across the department, kind of looking at how we lead with equity frameworks, and by, through that, how we apply anti-displacement strategies in different areas of our work. So a large part of my work also is under the ETOD program, which is under community planning and touches on station area planning work, and through that engagement with small businesses and residents and CBOs. And so we're also like kind of uncovering, early conversations around what people are thinking in terms of community-led development, places where small businesses have leases coming up, opportunities where property owners are considering selling, big sites, and what it could be like for OPCD, like what does it mean if like the zoning changes happen, but then there's opportunity for a business or independent property owner to buy that property, can exist. If the zoning changes happen, then that changes that opportunity. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation, but we're considering all that in our ETOD work.
Thank you. Rose, we have 3 minutes left on this topic, so just time check.
Yeah, so my question has to do with how much you've had a chance to talk with other City of Seattle departments. In particular, I'm thinking SDCI for anything related to zoning, lot adjustments to get over that barrier of lot size, and then also SDOT's freight folks, because I know we had a presentation from them and they talk a lot about like the ins and outs of how you get goods where they need to go.
Yeah, totally. So SDCI received this SLI as like FYI, but we haven't worked closely with them since it was sent over or submitted to council. And definitely working with SDOT now, especially through, I work on the Graham Street Station infill station, and looking at traffic control and opportunities for there to be, businesses that can actually survive through like some of the construction that's going to happen, not only at Graham and MLK, but in, hopefully other sites in the neighborhood. And also we're just waiting to see what the Enterprise Initiative brings over from Sound Transit. But yeah, kind of considering everything as a whole. I see Rebecca. Hi. We were just in conversations last week about remnant parcels. So, but yeah, thank you everyone for your time. It was a pleasure to get to share this work. It was honestly the first time I've been able to present it as a whole body of work. So it was also really nice to see how it all dovetails and connects with each other, and hopefully tease up Julia's presentation on EDI updates.
Great. Thank you so much for the presentation. And yeah, come back anytime. Let's see. Now we're going to do an update on the Equitable Development Initiative program. Julia, let's see. You are the Funding and Community Investments Manager for the EDI program. And we have 35 minutes. Take it away.
Sorry, as soon as I put my presenter mode on, I lost you all. 1 second. So, for having me here, I feel like we used to have more regular coordination between the EDI Advisory Board and the Planning Commission. I have a couple of ideas of why that may have slowed, given where our team is right now. Had a lot on our plates, but appreciate the opportunity to connect back and share the exciting work that we've been up to. Okay, can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm going to do a fairly broad overview for the Equitable Development Initiative. I know that there's some new commissioners, probably since the last time we updated you. So apologies to those of you who are more familiar with our work. So the Seattle Equitable Development Initiative is a community-originated anti-displacement and access to opportunity program. Our main strategy is funding community-owned land and development, which we support through financial awards for capacity building, pre-development, acquisition, and capital funding. And our kind of historic purpose is to address the historic policy and market inequities by investing directly in programs and communities that are mitigating displacement. And I'm just going to flag ahead of time, my kid's school was canceled this morning due to an unexpected flood. So if we get a interruption, that's what's happening. So our origin story, we kind of talk about it as a confluence of events. There was ongoing deep community planning work in the Central District, in Rainier Beach, in like some of the early station area planning in the Rainier Valley, and like interdepartmental long-term relationship building through those community plans. There was joint fundraising for capacity building and community-led long-range neighborhood planning. That resulted in communities identifying a need for real estate projects that were owned and led by the residents and the organizations that were rooted in those places. And there were 5 demonstration projects that came out of that work that then comprised a coalition called the Race and Social Equity Task Force. At the same time, we're talking 2013, 2014, 2015. it was the last comprehensive plan was coming together. There's a coalition in Southeast Seattle called South Core that was very active around advocacy around the comprehensive plan. And at that time, the majority of the city's growth was concentrated in Southeast Seattle along the light rail and in communities with high capacity transit, which makes sense from a planning perspective. But when you layer that over the historic disinvestment, redlining, restrictive covenants, the places that we have built high capacity transit and have concentrated our growth are also heavily overlaid with those communities that are experience heightened displacement risk due to kind of identities, economic status, access to opportunity. And so this coalition was pushing for, at that time, the displacement risk analysis that we all look to and refer to in the growth and equity strategy for the last comprehensive plan. That only exists because of community advocacy. And lo and behold, showed that there was clear displacement risk associated with the growth strategies. And they started advocating for a mitigation strategy. And so there's like these projects that are emerging, there's advocacy around mitigation, and the EDI program was created due to that pressure. And we were formed in 2016, so we're about to come up to our 10-year anniversary. These are the maps that were created as part of that analysis. And I'll say that the map on the left, the risk of displacement map, serves as the basis for our funding priority areas. So the heat map, the red areas. We don't restrict our funding to those areas because we know that there are communities that don't show up kind of demographically in this map, thinking about LGBTQIA communities, Indigenous communities, and we defer to like those communities to describe to us what their displacement risk and pressures are. But this is the basis of our funding. So we fund across a couple of different categories, like I mentioned before, capacity building. Many of the organizations we fund have never even thought about owning anything. And this will be the first capital project that they take on or facility ownership opportunity that they have. And so we support them to build up the organizational capacity that it takes to both own, operate, and in sometimes participate in the redevelopment of their site. We help them fund site acquisition. We help them fund pre-development and construction of the community-owned equitable development real estate projects. And our awards, our capacity building awards are $75,000. And we have funded projects, I think, maybe we're like at an 8 or 9 year timeline for capacity building because that's how long the project is taking. So we are in it to win it for those projects. And then we've awarded over $5 million to support acquisition and construction. What was I gonna say? Oh, yesterday we had a lunch and learn kind of talking about risk. And there was somebody on our panel was saying like sometimes what it takes to give credibility to these projects isn't just to be the first dollar in, but to be the first cent into a project. And I really like that really resonated with me. Like sometimes we are that first $75,000 that allows them to hire their first staff person because they've been operating as a volunteer-led organization. Our decision making for how the awards are made happens through a community review panel. It's consensus based, and we try to make our application as low barrier as possible, kind of decentering things like feasibility and readiness. We're kind of reevaluating that a little bit, but historically we've devalued feasibility and readiness. So that we can get money to organizations who have been historically denied resources. And then just a note for that many of you may be aware of that the Washington State Constitution prohibits the gifts of public funds. And so we've had to be creative in how we maintain that public benefit for the long term using tools like are used in affordable housing, like restrictive covenants and deeds of trust, which can take a lot of our grantees by surprise. And like those are really heavy words with like charged history. But the other thing that we do is give a 5-year on-ramp to deliver those public benefit services. Once you acquire the site, you have 5 years to kind of work on your project. You don't have to start delivering those public benefits right away. So just narrowing in on our purpose, we were created and we exist to serve as that critical first funder in the capital stack. There are some projects that EDI is the only funder. They're a little bit smaller, but I would say on a majority of our projects, we have helped organizations to be able to leverage other private and public funding. We position community accountable institutions as the leaders of development in their own neighborhood. And we boost ownership and mitigate the high risk of social, economic, and cultural displacement. The sources of our funding, the initial one-time source, or it was initially only a one-time source, was $16 million from the Civic Square property across from City Hall, the pit across from City Hall. Thanks, John, for pointing to it. And then since then, we've received other one-time allocations from the sale of other publicly owned property. So the Mercer Mega Block sale in South Lake Union, EDI received a portion of those funds, but they were also the Strategic Investment Fund was another kind of acquisition specific program that was created that we steward those projects. And we have ongoing funding from the payroll expense tax and the short-term rental tax. And in the 2025 adopted budget, you can see we have about, oh my gosh, can't do math, 24.8 million for projects specific, excluding staffing. Okay, this is the same information, but just to name that we have a co-governance model with an appointed advisory board. They have kind of an interesting structure, which I don't know, I think is interesting that it's a 13-member board. A third of them, or less than a third of them are appointed by the mayor, less than a third of them are appointed by council. And then the remaining largest share, more than a third, are actually like self-identified and confirmed by council. And so there's this feeling like the board needed to retain some control and management over like who was on the board, to keep that community co-governance front and center. This is our portfolio of projects. And I think it's actually, this is an older slide, but we actually have 75 unique community-led projects. There's a couple of them that received funds, but like the organization was not successful and they don't exist anymore. But you can see that over time and really starting in 2021, the scale of our program increased significantly, which has led to us desperately needing strategic planning, because it's one thing to operate a $5 million fund. It's something else to operate an like ongoing $25 million fund with 75 projects. So we're making do. I wanted to highlight a couple of our projects, and I'm not sure how I'm doing on time. Will you let me know how I'm doing on time? The first one is the Rainier Beach Action Coalition Food Innovation Center. This is one of our demonstration projects, and they were able to purchase a property across the street from the Rainier Beach Light Rail Station. EDI put in $5 million towards the acquisition, capacity building, and site improvements, and they actually just got their certificate of occupancy. So they are in operation. And the community center, this is created through their community visioning, centering food access, food sovereignty, youth employment, and kind of small business incubation in Rainier Beach. So they have a youth employment and job center, commercial kitchen, and they have distribution of food sourced from local BIPOC farmers there. They have an amazing food stand in the summer that's free. And they had some challenges finding a site. There was like enhanced speculative development that was happening in the neighborhood. They got outbid, but they were eventually able to purchase the site that they're currently in early planning for the second phase of the project, which will include affordable housing on the site. So this is kind of a temporary use, but they'll be building affordable housing in the next 10 years or so. The second demonstration project that I want to name is the Friends of Little Saigon Landmark Project. They identified the need for community-owned gathering space and affordable commercial space in Little Saigon. And also the need for affordable housing. And when this project was envisioned, there was no housing in Little Saigon, right? Like this is a like small business and office space neighborhood with no housing in it. And so it was at the time it was visionary. Since then, there have been several housing projects that have opened and become operational. We supported them with capacity building, site acquisition, and pre-development, and they are in permitting right now and currently fundraising for the housing dollars. They received a sizable award from Office of Housing in the state, but as you all know, costs have escalated significantly in the last couple of years, so they're doing some kind of last fundraising, and they think they hope to break ground next fall. The thing I really appreciate about this project is that they had a really methodical exploration of the sites. There are a lot of long-time property owners in the neighborhood that were waiting for a strategic moment to sell, kind of had some unreasonable expectations on price. And there's contamination issues in the neighborhood as well. But they, stuck with it, built relationships, and were able to buy this property on Jackson and 10th, so right in the heart of the neighborhood. And they've been doing a community design and visioning process alongside their partner, SCIPTA, who will be developing the housing. And then another I think it's one thing to think about these projects on a individual project by project basis, but I also want to zoom out and show like the impact of our investments and the co-location of the projects that we've been able to fund, for example, in the Central District. So a neighborhood that has experienced significant displacement already and where Black-led organizations are trying to bring back the historic Black community to the neighborhood through activation of space, through ownership. And we've been able to fund 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, at least 12 organizations to either buy property or renovate their properties. Including a couple of high-profile projects like the Midtown Africatown Community Land Trust Midtown Project, Wanawari, Art Noir, Bird Bar Place, and the Central Area Youth Association. And then I think I don't know if I have a picture of the Hip Hop is Green site.
Got the last little bit of this one.
Can I get it for you in a minute, love? Do you feel safe pouring it yourself? Okay, thanks, yes. Hip Hop is Green. They have built this amazing hydroponic um, uh, plant, edible plant where container on like 19th and Cherry. And they're growing like we did a site visit there and it was just phenomenal. It's like the equivalent of growing in this container, equivalent of like 3 acres of land or something, just something ridiculous. And they're doing youth like development on like training on cultivation and harvesting. And then they also partner with the food bank at Bird Bar Place. So their youth like deliver all the food to Bird Bar Place and then like help distribute the food there. And so I think it's not just about the one project, but about how these projects interact with each other. And obviously, these projects, we are just a small part of these projects, right? Like we are not the reason that they exist, but we are excited to be able to help and facilitate them. And then our 2025 EDI work has been, I think, a really exciting reopening of the program after some pretty intense scrutiny that we experienced last year through the budget process. We opened an RFP this year for $24.3 million. And the awards will be announced in December. We're in the middle of making those the community review panels in the middle of scoring right now. We developed a roster of consultants to support our grantee organizations, but it's really accessible to the public. And it's a roster that consists of organizational development consultants, but also project development consultants. Because we were getting asked like, hey, like, do you know an architect? Hey, do you know an owner's rep? Like, hey, I need somebody to help me with a capital campaign. And so this roster, they can go to select by the like consultant expertise and reach directly out to them. They'll use their own funds to do that, but it's essentially a list of vetted consultants. And then we're also launching a technical assistance program where EDI will pay for some coaching by those consultants on our roster to help projects get unstuck when they are kind of at an important moment in their project, but having a hard time figuring out how to take their next steps. As Jessica mentioned, we are launching our strategic planning process right now. Jessica, I don't know if you want to put in the chat a link to the procurement. I think it's open for a couple more weeks. We're looking to hire a consultant team to help us with some pretty robust engagement and visioning and recommendations about our strategies for the next 5+ years of the program. We just brought on 5 new EDI advisory board members, and we snuck in through the budget and anticipate at least the first confirmation in the land use committee next week. We have developed new contracting templates to streamline our contracting process and get money out the door more efficiently. One thing that I'm really excited about, because this is about the time that I started at the city and took on the leadership of our strategic investment fund. So this was the Mercer Mega Block funds. We had $30 million that was specific for land acquisition. We have one anticipated closing, I think maybe early January next year, for the last SIF award project, which is really exciting. It took 5.5 years, but like that's what it takes, right? When you're not ready to, when you come in as a project with a vision, but not necessarily a plan to execute. We're also developing a readiness self-reflection tool for our grantees so that they feel like they understand how to evaluate their own project readiness, and then also a roadmap of kind of what to expect moving forward. At the request of our grantees and with support from our board, we developed an emergency funding policy. So where there are current EDI projects that have an unanticipated funding need outside of our regular RFP cycle, they can come to us for funds that we can award on a rolling basis. But that's only available to existing grantees. And we're bringing that to the board for final approval next month. We also, we're sad that we had a couple of staff leave, but it also created the opportunity for 3 of our staff to be promoted internally. And we are hiring for 3 positions. One was filled earlier this summer for a project manager. We're in the middle of a hiring process for a board, really like our board relations, internal program operations. And then we just submitted the paperwork to HR for a real property specialist to help us through some of our transactional due diligence and coordination with the city attorney's office. So if you know anybody who is a values aligned, mission aligned, real estate professional or paralegal, we'd love to have you send them our way. And that's all for me. I'm going to stop sharing so I can see your questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Julia. Let's see. We have 10 minutes left. So if you want to hop in the queue, or Margaret, if your question, you were last on the queue in the last one, but if it pertains to Julia's presentation, by all means, jump in.
Yeah, thank you. I think my question could overlap a bit. So yeah, thank you so much for your presentation. It looks like there's a lot of really good work happening in 2025, especially with developing out the technical assistance programs, the contracting templates. So you might have stated it earlier, but can you share a little bit more about EDI's strategy for connecting with small businesses early on? Is it mostly EDI-led outreach, or how do these small businesses get into and like find these programs early?
Yeah, so something that I think the statement of legislative intent does really well is talk about the challenges that the city has in general funding space for small businesses. So the restrictions in the state constitution around the gift of public funds clearly state that there needs to be a public purpose or a public benefit resulting from those investments. And my understanding is that the origin of that portion of the Constitution dates back to the railway days and railway barons trying to get public money for projects to support their private interests. And so it's really hard for us to fund small businesses directly. And I'm sure the Office of Economic Development can speak with a lot more clarity on this. But in their new business community ownership fund, they don't actually just give the money to the small businesses to own the property. They have a long-term steward called Grow America. It's a technical assistance provider and CDFI who is kind of co-owning in a joint venture LLC with those small businesses to kind of permanently protect that investment for public benefit. So I think the creative ways that we've been able to support the public benefits, can call out the specific public benefits that small businesses offer, is where those small businesses go above and beyond their business operations to provide public benefits. And so thinking about Black and Tan Hall, which is in Hillman City. They do a lot of free and public programming, leadership development.
Say something.
You can, but I'm talking right now. Do you want to come sit with me? Wow, that's a full trick, babe. Can you give me 5 more minutes? Can you go maybe find a Lego to play with or something? I have 5 more minutes in my presentation, so you can sit with me, or you can go do something else. Not right now. Okay, so going above and beyond their business operations. The other way that we've been able to support small business is like in the example of African Community Housing and Development. They are doing small business incubation kind of through their nonprofit and creating the space for small businesses. But EDI is not directly subsidizing their rent. So I think with the Strategic Investment Fund, we were a little bit more proactive in trying to engage with small businesses. But I think it really takes that intermediary to be organizing the small businesses directly around and socializing some of these ideas of shared ownership, of public benefits, things like that. So I hope I answered your question. Apologies for the interruption, the small person interruption.
No problem. Julia has a question.
Thanks, Matt. Hi, Julia. Good to see you. I'm an EDI super fan, as you know. Like everything y'all do is just so incredible and exciting. I was curious, and also for Jessica, something to think about. And you started your presentation talking about previous engagements with the Planning Commission and the ways that there was mutual support with that work. And I'm curious of ways that we could do that moving forward, or if you have any ideas, because this is just such amazing work. And I think there's really great opportunity to leverage community leadership in these different spaces, because I know you already have wonderful groups of dedicated community members working the advisory board and other spaces. So just, yeah, excited and eager about opportunities to collaborate or further the work.
I mean, I'm looking at the planning commission staff and like I feel like it's just up to us to kind of figure out how to schedule that and what the alignment is. One of the things that's upcoming I did not put in the in my slides is the implementation of the Roots to Roofs pilot from Councilmember Mercedes Rink that was adopted earlier this fall. The language and the legislation specifies coordination with the EDI advisory board, but I feel like that there's also potentially some, there's a lot of expertise that you all have that we could learn from. So I think that's one kind of discrete opportunity for us, but it also feels like a good chance just to do a meet and greet type of thing. We are planning maybe for early December a award announcement and celebration for the RFP, and we actually doubled the number of projects that entered operations this year from 9 to 20. So there's just a lot to celebrate. It's been a hard couple of years for everybody. It's hard right now. We need as many opportunities to celebrate as possible. So definitely extend that invitation to you all as well. Look to you to think about other ways that we could collaborate.
Okay, thank you. We have just a couple minutes left. Anyone else have any comments? A short comment before we close?
Yeah, I'll just say just a quick one if nobody else has anything. Just an appreciation for the work that you guys are doing. I've been in the Central District off and on for a bit, and yeah, lots of thoughts about me moving into the Central District, knowing the history of the Central District, being based like kind of feeling, part of the problem by moving into an area that has been experiencing displacement and basically being a part of that. But watching what's happened at 23rd and Union and how development can address displacement has been incredibly inspiring. And it's just it's amazing the work that's happened on that 23rd and Union block in those corners. So just props for that. Keep it up. It's really inspiring.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Jess, Julia, thank you very much for your presentations today. We look forward to hearing more. As one of the folks that's on the EDI roster, I cannot wait to hopefully, help out with some project. I hope some come my way. With that, I think I'll close the Planning Commission meeting at this point, and everyone have a great Thursday. Thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.